During the 1970s, fear of kidnappings became almost routine in Italy. And by the mid 1970s, Italy was gripped by a crime that people couldn't look away from. Newspapers covered the story day after day, yet this was not the first kidnapping that Italy experienced, yet one that revealed how powerful organized crime had become. For the Ndrangheta, kidnappings were never an endgame, but rather a means to build capital, a foundation for larger and more profitable criminal activities. In the 1970s and 80s, many of the Ndrangheta clans were expanding beyond their home base in Calabria and settling into northern Italy. Such moves required cash, large amounts at that. The organization had its eyes on one of the most profitable rackets, drug trafficking, something that demanded upfront money to purchase shipments, secure transport, pay intermediaries, bribing officials, and of course, absorbing loss when shipments were seized. To fund all of the above, the organization had a solution: kidnappings. The ransoms would generate liquid money. A successful kidnapping could produce a large enough sum of money to finance multiple future drug operations. And that money would not only be used in this capacity, it helped purchase weapons, supported the families of incarcerated members, bribes, and to expand their operations in other areas of Italy, as mentioned. The kidnapping business essentially acted as a startup phase by allowing clans to accumulate capital, build trust and partnerships, and move into more complex and lucrative rackets. As time passed, drug trafficking eventually became more profitable and kidnapping became less central. Nevertheless, the damage was done. The following story isn't about another extortion or instilling fear. It was a deliberate strategy, one using human lives as leverage to catapult the organization into arguably becoming the most powerful, as it still is to this very day. Christina Mazzotti was an 18-year-old student from the Como area of northern Italy. She attended Carducci Classical High School, and on June 30th, 1975, she was out celebrating with her friends and attending a graduation party at a bar in Erba. Following the party, she traveled in a car driven by her boyfriend, where another friend accompanied them. At some point along the way, a Fiat blocked their car from proceeding. Four men jumped out, tied up the boyfriend and friend, and forced Christina into the Fiat. A second car, an Alfa Romeo, also played a part. Investigators later established that she was transported to a farmhouse known as Cascina Padre Eterno on the outskirts of Castelletto Ticino in the Lombardy-Piedmont region. She was placed in an underground concrete pit in a garage, an area that was extremely confined, with her only means of oxygen coming from a small plastic tube. During her captivity, she received 2 sandwiches daily and was kept semi-conscious with Valium. Her father, Giuseppe Mazzotti, was a successful industrial entrepreneur, well known in his area and considered wealthy and financially secure, a perfect target and wealthy enough to pay a large ransom. Shortly after Christina's abduction, the kidnappers made an extremely high ransom demand of 5 billion lire. They ultimately lowered that amount, and Giuseppe Mazzotti came up with 1.5 billion lire and handed it over. At the same time, he was cooperating with authorities who were working desperately to secure his daughter's release. Sometime between the 30th of July and August 1st, Christina's body, due to a combination of the sedatives, the harsh conditions, and lack of proper ventilation, it was at that time that she died. On top of this, during the ransom handover, the Ndrangheta created the illusion that Christina was still alive, but in reality, she was already dead. So they let her father cling to hope of getting his daughter back, fully knowing this would never happen. Nearly 2 months after she was abducted, on September 1st, 1975, Christina's remains were discovered in a landfill near Gagliate in northern Italy. The discovery came after an anonymous tip was made to the Carabinieri. There was no dramatic rescue, no final exchange. Instead, Christina was gone. For the public, the anxious expectation became a symbol of something far darker, a belief where human life came secondary to profit, as well as where the mafia could take, negotiate, and just disappear. In the immediate aftermath, several people were arrested, brought to trial, and convicted. These people were physically involved, but on a lower level in the grand scheme. The initial investigation didn't reach the mafia structure behind the crime. Those arrested had little incentive and great risk in naming higher-ranking people. So for decades, the question remained unknown. Who ordered the kidnapping? The Christina Mazzotti case became frozen in time, and the file was closed. By the 1990s and going into the 2000s, Italian investigators no longer viewed the 'Ndrangheta as a loose collection of Calabrian criminals. They understood exactly how powerful, influential, and wealthy the organization became. In and around 2007, investigators caught a break. The Rome Forensic Police discovered through advanced fingerprinting technology that a print found on the car Christina was driving in the night she disappeared belonged to Demetrio Latella. That fingerprint match reopened the case and consequently led to Latella's arrest, where he admitted to being involved when questioned and provided information that allowed investigators to piece together what happened and who was responsible. However, he was not considered a police or prosecution informant in the traditional sense and didn't fully defect from the 'Ndrangheta. Latella was indeed a trusted member, a lower-level one, a person they used for hands-on operations. But more crucially, he'd been convicted and served 22 years for another 'Ndrangheta kidnapping and death, and because of that conviction, his fingerprints were entered into an official database. Latella was also suspected of being involved in the 1983 murder of Magistrate Bruno Caccia, although Rocco Sciarippa was arrested for that crime 32 years later. Anyway, Latella named Giuseppe Calabro and Antonio Talia as his accomplices. Calabro was a prominent 'Ndrangheta member linked to the clans of San Luca and served as a mediator between 'Ndrangheta clans. The revelation of his importance came from statements made by William Serbo, a collaborator in the Hydra investigation that represented an alliance between members of Sicilian Cosa Nostra, the 'Ndrangheta, and the Camorra. Calabro is described as a person with exceptional wisdom, a point of reference for advice and protection, and a major drug trafficker. He served a sentence for cocaine dealing and was investigated for other kidnappings and arms trafficking. Antonio Talia was also an 'Ndrangheta member, but not central or high-ranking as Calabro. The investigation established that the mastermind of the kidnapping was Giuseppe Morabito, an 'Ndrangheta boss of the Morabito Fazea clan. He was also the person who lent the car used in the abduction, the Alfa Romeo, that was registered to his sister. Morabito spent 12 years as a fugitive and remained on Italy's most wanted list until his arrest in 2004, where he was convicted for drug trafficking and mafia association. He was indicted alongside Calabro, Latella, and Talia, but passed away on November 29, 2024, of a heart attack, which left Calabro, Latella, and Talia as the defendants in the trial. The statute of limitations ran out on the kidnapping charge, but the murder charge remained. On February 4, 2026, Calabro and Latella were convicted and received life sentences. Talia was acquitted. The evidence against him couldn't support a conviction. And despite being sentenced, Calabro was permitted to remain free on appeal. However, on February 7th, days ago, an arrest warrant for him was issued. Apparently, he had booked a flight that was leaving at 8:35 a.m. that very day from Milan to Calabria. Authorities believed he was a flight risk because of his high-level connections in Calabria. If you haven't liked this video yet, please take the time now and give it a like, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. Anyone who'd like to show their appreciation for videos like this, or more importantly, help me to continue making them, you can donate with the Super Thanks icon down below or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Let me quickly mention my blog, also called Sitdownnews, especially for those of you who still enjoy reading. The site can be found at sitdownnews.com and is a paid subscription. Giuseppe Calabro was interviewed by journalist Klaus Davi when he was first accused of his involvement in this case. Davi said to him, "They describe you as the great leader of San Luca. How do you respond?" Calabro replied, "No, I'm not the boss of anything. I'm like parsley, good for all seasons."